Well, that was gentle enough. So that being said, this is what we do afterwards. We call this the Afterburn. This is where we allow for comments or questions on the teaching. If you're on the live stream, you guys right there, and I can see you in your living room. Be nice to Kurt and Rob. Be respectful. This is the time when you guys, if you're going to have a problem, this is when it happens. Okay, please, this is not an opportunity for you to argue with, fight against, or set your own agenda. Allow the people that are connected to our ministry, or even if they're not, to have genuine questions about what was taught or comments, to go ahead and place them, okay? Let's be respectful, though. If this is important for all of you listening, and I can feel confident in saying this, if anything that you do does not maintain the 9 aspects of the fruit of the Spirit, you are already wrong. Okay? If you are not maintaining love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, meekness, etc., if you cannot do that, you are already wrong. So if you're not being gentle and respectful and all the other things that are required in that chat room, even if your answer or your comment may actually be right, you're still going to be wrong, okay? How you do things matters. All right? Okay. Who wants to go first? Okay, Christine?
So I listened to Discovering Your Identity Part 3 this morning, and I'd like to hopefully apply what I learned from that teaching to some of the verses here in Colossians. So can you tell me if it's applicable? In verse 12, if I read it this way, giving thanks to the Father who has made us fit to share in the inheritance of one house of the set-apart ones in the light, who has delivered us from the authority of darkness, in parentheses, being scattered, and transferred us into the reign of one shepherd, in whom we have redemption through his blood, rather than having to be native born.
Okay, I would say that everything you said is correct, but I don't want it to confuse people, so let me kind of clarify it a little bit. All right, you have 2 things happening at the same time. You're only addressing one. Okay, one of the things that she's addressing that's correct is that there was a splitting of the kingdom and the covenanted people into 2 houses. And so she's talking about the restoring of that. But in the process of restoring that, it's also bringing everybody in that didn't have anything to do with either one of the houses. So that's the part that we want to make sure we don't miss that, okay? And the other piece that is correct is that in doing so, we're dealing with like Ezekiel 37, where they are then going to choose to come under one shepherd. And by the way, I don't want to diminish that at all. You need to all understand, if you are truly a Gentile, you're only getting involved because of the promises to restore 2 covenanted groups of people of which you are not a part of, but can become a part of. And that's what Ephesians is talking about as well, saying that when you were Gentiles, you were not a part of this deal. But you can, because of the way that the Father planned this out with the Son and the whole process, you can now be a part of it. But the thing that you're becoming a part of is the restoring of 2 houses into one, which is Ezekiel 37. Okay, go ahead.
I thought it was neat to think of the Messiah's blood as, being part of that bloodline, that lineage, rather than having to be a native-born Israelite. And then in Discovering Your Identity, you talked about the ger, or the gerim, the process of that citizenship change. And, well, maybe I can talk to you later, because I think I'm asking about different teaching in conjunction to this.
Right, because you were listening to that one this morning. Okay, don't worry, we can talk about it later. But listen, I just thought of something, because when you mentioned the word blood, I think we need to understand, rather than only think of it from some sort of sacrificial way, okay? When you say, I poured out my blood into something, you're basically saying you gave your whole life into something. You gave every bit of your ounce of your effort. I sweated blood. I put every blood, sweat, and tears into. It's another part of it is not just literal. It's that idiomatic understanding of he gave all of his being, his life into making this happen. Okay, so when it talks about the idea of through his blood, through what the life is in the blood, through his life, through his blood, through his giving everything, it brings these things. Don't only think of it and diminish it to the idea of the literal blood coming out of his body and somehow that goes into the sacrificial system. Does that make sense? Does that help a little bit? Okay, who's next? Steve?
All right. This is from in another teaching you had stated that the Torah holds the world together. And I think this ties into my thought was that with it in place, we should not wonder why our lives are a mess, because if we were under the authority of the Torah, the chaos would be far more manageable if we were under Torah.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody manages the chaos of their life in the world if they don't have the Torah. Okay? And I'm not speaking from, like, I've always been raised in it, so I don't know. I mean, I lived without the Torah, and I know what that's like. I don't know how you have a hope, how you're not. I can understand why so many in the world suffer anxiety and depression. What I don't understand is why so many in the body do. If you have your hope in him and you trust in him and have emunah, why would you ever have anxiety or depression? Because we're coming from a different place. And in that different place, you were under an authority of darkness. And letting go all those little darkness areas of your life is hard to do. So I'm not picking on you if you still suffer from these things. Realize that that's a part of you that's still living in darkness. Because if you're in light, you would never be depressed. If you're in light, you would never have fear and anxiety. You would never have insecurities, because in the light, none of those things can exist. So again, they're just showing you an area that you need to work on. So I'm not picking on you, mocking you, diminishing you. This is a rampant problem in the body. But the body, all of us came out of darkness. I don't think I've ever met anybody that didn't spend some time in darkness. And so darkness breeds those things. Remember, it says that you had a problem in your mind, your enemy's in your mind, and in that mind is when you're insecure and depressed and fearful and all those other negative things. This all starts off in your mind, and that mind, if it's under a darkness authority, is going to just flourish in that mess. Okay? So don't be even more depressed now that you still have more darkness in your life. Just recognize that that is an area you need to work on to find a way to walk in light. Have your mind in light. Focus on, I can do all things through Yeshua. Focus on, nothing is impossible. Focus on, he's got the plan. I fully trust it, even if I can't see it. Focus on emunah. He causes or allows all things because all things work for the good. Focus on all that stuff and stop that other thinking. We need to have thinking that's in that light and then walk in that light, okay? All right, next. Deirdre?
I'm giggling because you kind of stole what I was going to say. It's basically was just, I don't know, this...
I can't steal it because that would be breaking a command. I just preemptively said it.
Well, this is kind of a joint thing because my husband had the thought and I'm like spitting out the comment. But I don't know, during the sermon of, the mindset and, if you're thinking a certain way, then, I don't know, it's reminded him of René Descartes, I think, therefore I am.
Well,
if you're thinking, I don't know, to me, if you're thinking, Torah is, wrong, this is not, the right way to go, then, that's how you're going to act. But
all right, so instead of I think, therefore I know that I exist, which is kind of more what it was saying, I think, therefore I am what I think. Okay? Let's just kind of bring the circle around. I think, therefore I become or I am what I think. So if you change what you think, you can be something different. And so we're supposed to change what we think, and we're told that very clearly, let this mind, the mind of Yeshua, be in you, so you think like him, and if you think like him, guess what? You become like him. Okay? Because if you think like him, you'll act like him. So I think, therefore I become what I think. So if I work on the mind and the thoughts, then that'll affect what I become. Okay, who's next? Okay, Francis?
Hi. In conjunction to what you were saying and what she was saying regarding what you think and thinking in alignment to what Yahweh thinks and all of that, can you help me understand that in conjunction with the name it, claim it Christian mindset and positive thinking? Is there ever a time where that's inappropriate, where, you know, a lot of people out there will confess positive things? You know what I mean?
Sure. I think I know what you mean. Okay. So here's the deal. First of all, on the one hand, recognize that what you think is not magical, meaning it's just because you think it once or twice, it doesn't mean that anything's going to happen. And thank Yah for that, because we think a lot of dumb things, and we're glad those dumb things don't manifest. Okay? So the secret, which was out there and all that whole, idea of the law of attraction and everything else, that law is true. It just doesn't work the way some people might like to think it is. I mean, you tend to attract and align yourself in a certain way and attract things with your thoughts and your actions over a period of time. Okay? And so recognize that the name it, claim it is now also dealing with a second problem, which is somehow they believe that they're obligating the Creator, or they're obligating the universe, or whatever they believe in. If a lot of them are not, Torah or Bible-based, but there's more sort of secular humanism or some other universal mind or whatever they believe in. But they believe that somehow that is obligating, or you are obligating that to do something for you and manifest. So the name it, claim it is, if I say it, the God is obligated to give it to me. That's a wrong mindset. Okay? Better, you should understand that if you say it because he said it and you dwell on it and think on it, your actions will be in line with it. You can count on it manifesting because that's what he's told you. He's told you if you think a certain way and then you'll behave a certain way, you can feel confident you'll receive certain things. As opposed to name it, claim it. I get frustrated sometimes. Sometimes I laugh when, somebody may talk to me and see how I'm doing. I say, well, I think I'm dealing with a head cold. Oh, no, don't claim that. I'm not claiming that. I'm just stating a fact. Give me a break. It's not like, what do you believe in voodoo too and black magic and whatever? I mean, you're all afraid someone to put a curse because the voodoo, the boogeyman's going to show because I just said the boogeyman. I mean, come on, all right? If I'm suffering from a head cold, saying it doesn't change that or make it worse. And saying I don't have one isn't going to make it disappear if I have one. But putting myself in a right emotional place where I go, well, I think I have a head cold, but you know what? I'm not going to let it get me down. I know I'm going to recover. I'm going to be very positive about that. I'm going to be looking forward to the healing that will come eventually. I'm going to make lifestyle changes, like I'm going to make sure I'm doing a better job not eating sugar and other things that will hurt my immune system. I'm going to maybe do some more chicken soup or something that will help it or whatever. And so I will get better. All right? And that's going to start with better thoughts and being more mindful of maybe some of the things that caused me to be more susceptible to getting sick. Maybe I wasn't getting enough sleep. Maybe I was causing too much stress on my system because of some sort of emotional thing. If you're depressed, if you're angry, if you're insecure, if you're upset in any kind of negative emotion, this will diminish your immune system. This is scientific. They've measured that. Positive emotions are immune system boosters. If your immune system is not doing so well, go watch a bunch of stuff that makes you laugh your head off. It will literally boost your immune system. Okay? I don't know if it was true or not, but I remember reading like a Reader's Digest story many, many years ago about somebody with a fatal illness that just decided, well, I'm going to die. I might as well just enjoy the end. So they just spent hours and hours for like a couple of weeks just watching everything that made, and they got better actually, just laughing their way to health. Instead of terminally getting depressed about the fact that their health was bad. All right? And that thunder, see, he agrees. That was it. Amen. For those online, you couldn't hear that, but there was like a thundering rumble outside. All right, but be careful with the way Christianity does it. Christianity wants to turn it into some sort of incantation magic. And not just Christianity, those in the secular world also. The idea of name it, claim it, speak positive. Look, you should speak positive because as you think, so you'll act, and your behavior and your mindset will be, and it will affect everything. All right? You wonder why you have a crummy day sometimes? Because you started off the day with an attitude that was a crummy attitude, and then it just kept going on and on and on. And things that maybe you normally would never have bothered you will bother you. Things that you may not even notice, you'll notice. Because you're going to notice what matches your mindset. If you go to something expecting to be miserable, you will find every reason to be miserable. You know, we had a guy once said that he used to go to every congregation he went to looking for reasons to leave, and he always found one. And then he realized that maybe he should go looking for reasons to stay. And you know what? He found some of those too. So the mindset's important. The name it, claim it thing is all that fluffy stuff that attracts people because people want to do something that doesn't require anything. What effort is it to just claim something? Now, if you're going to say things as sort of like a mindset mantra, I'm going to walk in the merited favor of Yah, then the more you say that, the more you're going to realize I have to do things that actually match that. If you're going to say, I'm happy, then you're going to do things that match being happy. If you're going to be angry, you're going to do things that match being angry. So claiming it or naming it from that point of view is totally appropriate. Okay, the power of positive thinking, there are books like that. The power of belief, there are books like that. I've read all those books. Those things work because as you think, you will eventually do things that will help that come to be. But it's not one of those snap your fingers, magical, whatever things. And you do not get to obligate the creator of the universe. He's already obligated himself. If you will do what he says, he will take care of everything else. He's already told you that. But he didn't say he would take care of it the way you want. He'll just take care of it. You could trust that or you don't. And if you're only banking on this physical world, then you're focusing incorrectly anyway. Okay? Because this physical world, no matter how abundant your life may have been, eventually you die. There's nobody, in the immortal words of Jim Morrison, nobody gets out of here alive. Okay? They just don't. You can have abundant health, total abundant wealth, have very little stress, everything going all well. It's still not going to change the fact that you get to die. Okay? Now the rain's coming from the thunder we heard. Okay? So that being said, okay, next question. Okay, Michael.
So the first one's just kind of a comment. I had watched or listened to another one of your teachings where you were talking about when Yeshua had cast out a demon, and it was by whose authority did he cast it out? When he says, if I've cast out this demon by the authority of my Father, then the kingdom has come upon you. So that first part of Colossians kind of brought that to mind, that the kingdom, when you're right in darkness and you go to light, the kingdom has come upon you. So that was the first kind of statement. And then the second one was in Colossians 1:20, where it says, okay, and through him to completely restore to favor all unto himself, whether on earth or in the heavens. Is there a possibility that there's when he's saying that he's going to restore restoration, I can see what, the restoration to us as humans. But when he says in heaven, what does he have to restore in heaven?
Well, again, there was an authority problem up there too. We have a understanding that there's been a rebellion, or there will be continue to be at the end. The book of Revelation talks about some of these things. So all things are going to come completely properly under authority where they need to be. And that's what it's talking about. And by the way, we didn't really hit on it hard enough, I guess. But in verse 13, when it talks about coming out of the darkness authority, we're transferred into the reign. Okay? Not the democratic government or this kind of government or that kind of government. There's no voting. It's a kingdom. It's a very specific type of authority. So we're transferred into a kingdom authority of the Son. And so that's an important thing, again, to remind us. It's all about that vertical structure. Okay, who's next? Okay, Rick?
Yeah, I had a question on Colossians 1:9. It talks about, see if I can find it here, praying that you be filled with the knowledge of his desire in all wisdom, his desire. And I was trying to find it. I couldn't find it quickly enough in the Old Testament, but where what does Yahweh desire of you?
Deuteronomy 10:12.
There you go. Okay, thank you.
Wow, we haven't quoted that in a while either, but yeah.
Yeah, that plus also, a lot of what you talk about is authority and the authority structure, and we have an author. He wrote the book. He came in the flesh. So we're supposed to be like him or become like him.
And again, apparently I need to bring Deuteronomy 10:12 into it more if you forgot which verse that was, so that's my fault. Okay, Deuteronomy 10:12, it says, "Now, Israel, what is Yahweh's desire for you but to love him, to fear him, to walk in all his ways, to serve him, and to guard his commands?" And by the way, see, that's one of the things that's really important is that, we're getting questions from verses like verse 9, etc. I could have just started in verse 12 and 13, mentioned darkness and light, and had missed some of the context things. But always remember who the speaker is, who the audience is, and what the issue is, or why they're even talking is so critical to remember that this is to the set-apart ones. Okay, Shira.
Thank you for a tremendous message. I just would love to share a little bit of a testimony my last several weeks. I've been in need of emotional comfort, and I headed to, watching things and spending my time getting it the way I did back when I was a Christian, just whatever, binge watching serial things, and I even binge watched Little House on the Prairie. So
You have my sympathy.
yeah, thank you. But when you got near the end and we were talking about verse 23, if you continue in the belief, submission to the covenant you made, and it talks about being established, grounded, and settled, not moved away from the expectation of the good news. And then you said, what causes covenant people to lose favor? Acting outside of the covenant. And it just really hit me this last week. I want to testify that Father has really brought that home to me. That acting outside of the covenant, Shira, is not just neglecting the Sabbath or whatever, eating the wrong things, or even boiling your water for tea on Shabbat by mistake. Forgive me, Father. But as soon as I don't love him with all my heart, all my being, all my mind, all my resources, that word strength and might, I looked it up in Strong's. Is that right? I think it says, one of the meanings of that is all your resources. And I thought,
that's true.
What's the biggest resource any of us have? It's time.
Yes.
And you talked about wasting time. I've been listening to your wonderful message on Teach Us to Pray, and you really lit into us that time about how we spend our time. And so I want to just testify. This week, I got really convicted, and I said, okay, I've got to do just what you're talking about. I've got to make positive confessions from my mind. And where did I go to that? Back to all your teachings on Psalm 119. So I've been getting up in the morning saying, I love Torah. I love to study the Word. I love Yahweh with all my heart and soul and mind. I love to obey him. I love to pray. I love to all the things that I have been drifting away from. And he has been so faithful to give me several days of just richness in his word. And so I just want to submit that if we want to continue in the belief, we've got to be in the word.
Amen. Amen. I'm going to take the opportunity to hit on a verse that you quoted, but one of the words that I didn't really focus on, which was founded, okay? If indeed you continue in belief, founded and steadfast. So founded is like the foundation, okay? So the foundation of covenant is obviously as Exodus, the giving of the commandments, the coming together at Sinai, Exodus 19, etc. Now, but also what Shira was talking about is founding is also at the beginning. It's the base. So if you start your day by the foundation of your day being spending time getting your mind right, I'm not even saying you have to pray or read or do anything specific, but just like she said, I love Yahweh, I love Torah, I'm excited about what I'm going to do today to keep those things going. My mindset, I'm going to set my mind. That's your foundation every day. Then you can find yourself, having an easier time in doing these things steadfast. The foundation, founding yourself. Okay, so how do you start? Some of the most successful people in the world, or actually almost all the really outstandingly successful by whatever standard you use, almost all of them have some sort of morning routine. Okay, they have a ritual, or by ritual I don't mean like in a religious way. They just have a set pattern of behavior to start their days that gives them what they believe an optimal opportunity to have a maximally successful day. And so Shira discovered that if she starts her day off thinking about, I love Torah, I love Yahweh, I love your word, I love this, and that's your focus, instead of starting your day off with, I gotta go to work, so now you're all in this already negative whining focus. But if you can have a zeal and a zest and an excitement, and you focus it towards the right things, what might come of that? All right, so founding, I think that word founded there, because he says it first, says, if indeed you continue in belief, founded, your foundation, and then steadfast on the right foundation, what will that manifest? Okay, it'll manifest what you're hoping for. All the stuff this is the if that goes, if you do this, you get all that stuff we just talked about, it's so great. Being, transferred into the reign of the Son of Love, the Son of His love, the Father's love. Okay, who's next? Okay, Richard?
Thank you. I've been accused of being dyslexic, so I'm going to go from 23 to 21.
Okay.
If we continue in wicked works, our minds become the enemy and we are not restored. So
Correct.
I think the technical word is tukish. If we just sit around and think about this and do nothing, nothing happens. But when we actually partake in the process, which is an action, then we are not an enemy. The other thought that came to me, which makes no sense, because if we're dealing with you used the word, I forgot what it was. I mean, people that don't believe.
Uncovenanted.
Uncovenant. You can't use logic there. But we're quick to tell us in Christianity that we don't have to worry about works. It's all about just love them and life is great. Well, there's participation in that. And the logical side of that would be that if there's wicked works, there must be good works. It's just like the light and dark.
Amen.
And they don't want to hear that.
Amen. That's true. I mean, one of the things that I think, and I'm not sure I could hear you correctly, but I said that people don't want to hear that. Is that what you said at the end? Yeah. Information has to be shared, but there's only half of it. The other half of it has to be received. And you can choose not to receive, even though it's available and it was shared, or you can choose to receive. And that, by the way, goes to the good or the bad. You could choose to receive stuff you should have refused, and you could choose to refuse that which you should have received. Okay, who's next? Okay, Wayne?
Okay, so I've been getting prepared for a Pesach of the teaching we're going to start doing with the kids, the armor of Elohim. And everything that we read today brought me back to everything, especially when it was like guarding our loins, and how you brought it to guarding the loins of our minds, of putting everything straight, and how that's the first thing that he talks about is girding our waist with truth, which is Messiah, which is the Word.
Amen.
So I just want to point that out. It's really helping me get more in depth in this teaching. And, you know, you adult kids, pay attention to this because you're going to do this at the feast.
Amen. Wow. Listen, when we get to, eventually we're going to get back to, as we wrap this up, we're going to get to Romans 13, where it talks about putting on the armor of light. And I was going to mention then from Ephesians 6, the armor of Elohim. So we are going to cover that at some point. But I'm glad you already made that connection since you are already somewhat immersed in that. So
yeah, and I suggest for those online that your teaching the armor of Elohim is really good. It's a 2-part, but it's a really good, and it'll help them with a lot of things.
Okay, so armor of Elohim, there you go. All the kids are like quickly writing down. There's another teaching that was mentioned. Boy, we mentioned a lot of teachings today. All right, who's next? Okay, Rabbi Tom.
Recently, I've just relearned that it's important to balance our walk, because I've discovered just for myself what I've been doing lately is trying to get more information and ignoring the relational side, and the scale got tipped on information and was raised up on the relationship. And when Shara made the comment she did, I thought of that movie, Cool Hand Luke, where the warden said, "You got to get your mind right, boy. You got to get your mind right." And that's what we have to do. We got to get our minds right. And that's more important than, I mean, I'm not saying learning is unimportant. Learning is vital, but it's more important than any learning that we could possibly do to get in the right. And I've been guilty lately of ignoring that. And I've tried to solve it by praying more. That's what we got to do, pray.
Amen. Look, in Philippians 2:5, we quote this all the time, it says, "Let this mind be in you." But the problem is, you can also let any other mind be in you. You can adopt or adapt or, allow it to be infused into you. Your mother's mind, your father's mind, your other pastor's mind, if you ever had a pastor back in the day, your best friend's mind, your coworker's mind, and you, next thing you know, you're thinking like them. You see this with our children sometimes. They become friends with somebody, and one of the two will end up adapting the mind of the other. It's not always clear which one's going to, influence the other, but it's an influence thing. When he says, "Let this mind be in you," he says, let the mind of Yeshua influence your thinking. But we're already letting other minds influence our thinking. So you should be very selective of that. Look, I'm a big believer in listening to instructional stuff, reading stuff, whether it's life coaching related stuff or personal development or whatever it is, but I'm very selective of which ones I'm going to let that influence me. Okay? Because there's an old saying that you will become all of your inputs. The people you hang out with, what you listen to, what you read, etc., is going to eventually develop the mindset you have will match that influence. And so you should choose carefully what you spend a lot of your time immersed in, because it's going to have a potential to really influence the way you approach things, the way you respond to things, because that's the way you think. You think a certain way, you respond a certain way. You think a certain way, you take certain actions. You think a certain way, your mindset, your emotional state, your way of interpreting and filtering things is now being influenced by something else. And that's good if you choose the right influencers. But you need to choose influencers that have what you want, that not the ones that don't have what you don't, that have what you don't want or don't have what you want. So why do we want to let this mind be in you that was in Yeshua? Because Yeshua has everything you want. So that's why you should let that mind influence you more than any other. So really when it says let this mind be in you, I don't think I've ever taught it this way before, but the idea of using the word influence. Be influenced by and become in line with his mind. Okay? And I don't want it to sound very Christian-like where let this mind be in you, almost like you're being possessed and somehow his mind now takes over your mind. No. You're now modeling and molding your thoughts to be congruent with the way he would think in a given situation or a given opportunity. Okay, who's next? Okay, live stream.
All right, comment from Tracy Waymeyer. She says, I'm still thinking on the car analogy. She goes, that was awesome. Each car comes with a manual. The Torah would be that for us.
Well, that's true. It's not really part of the model I gave, because the model really had to do with more of, claiming that the car was the problem. But if you are going to have a car, you really should understand what is necessary to maintain that car. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, from Olivier and Janet Hoffman. It says, Rabbi, Colossians 2:15, could this be possibly related to when Yahweh sent the plague to Mitzrayim, demonstrating his might over all of their gods?
Yes, it would definitely be a type and shadow of what is being talked about here. He certainly stripped the principalities and authorities and showed them to be of no real authority in the Exodus story. Go ahead.
Okay, from Steve. It says, how do we know if we are considered set apart? Can you know this by yourself, or does leadership identify it to you like identifying your gift that leadership is supposed to do?
Look, I was just going to come up with some wise guy answer, but I'm not going to. Okay, so this is something that I want to be clear about. Because I've been accused, especially in the Are You Saved teaching, of somehow making, and I guess I maybe said the words, but it's not the way I intended it to be, the idea that you can't know something. I was like, because I've said you really won't ultimately know where you stand until you go before the judge. I mean, that's why you have to go before the judge, and the judge tells you where you stand. But I also know, I said it in the teaching, is that if you're doing what Scripture lays out to do the best you can, you should have every confidence that you have that status. Okay? So when it talks about set apart, if you're making every effort to be covenanted, which means that you're doing the Exodus 19, obeying his voice and letting that voice have full authority over you, that by definition, you should have confidence that you are a set apart one. A set apart one doesn't make you special. It doesn't mean you're in. It doesn't mean you've arrived. It means that you are in the process of the continuing in the belief founded in Steadfast and doing the works worthy of the Master. So what do we call that person? We can call them lots of things. We call them covenanted. You can call them Israel. You can call them set apart. Okay? I mean, labels are important, but they're not everything in terms of, making sure you got the right label. All right? And actually, labels are problematic if the person you're talking to understands your label different than you meant it. Which is why I don't like phrases like saved, grace, born again, because they don't necessarily mean to you, if you're my person I'm talking to, the way I mean them if I were to use them. So now we have to have a conversation about what I mean when I use a term. So I usually avoid terms that I know tend to be problematic in terms of us understanding the same, and I try to use other ways to explain it so that it's more clear. Because we have already built in understandings of the connotation of the word. We have an idea of what we think the word means, and, Okay, go ahead.
From Olivier and Janet Hoffman, says, Rabbi, chapter 1, verses 3 and 9, Yeshua prayed for us, so if our goal is to be like him, we should be praying for one another for endurance, patience, etc., but also work on our halakha individually. Is this correct?
All right, first of all, it doesn't say Yeshua prayed for it. It said Paul was praying. Okay, we give thanks to Elohim and the Father of the Master Yeshua, praying always for you. So Paul and Timothy were saying that they were praying for the people. Now, look, we should pray for one another. I mean, there's other verses which say pray for one another. But also, more importantly, this is talking about how he, in the leadership position, with his responsibility for those that are under his responsibility, prayed for them. Cared enough about them, wanted the Father to give them, what they needed to be equipped to walk in a worthy manner. But that, of course, goes back to Ephesians, for the role of the fivefold is to equip the set-apart ones with everything they need to eventually reach the fullness of the completeness of Messiah. Okay, next question.
All right, from Jesus Fierro says, in Colossians 1:1, we read, Paul, an apostle. My question is, are apostles and prophets for today?
Yes, I think I covered that last week. It's simply a role that is played. So if if you look at the Chabad uses this almost exclusively as like their primary way of doing things. They train up people and they send them out to a place to set up, a point of contact in every city in the world as much as they can. We could be doing the same thing once we could train up people to do that. Apostle simply means sent one. That's why in the scriptures it calls it an emissary. One sent with a message representing somebody else. Okay, in this case, representing Messiah. He says, I'm an emissary of Yeshua. So an apostle is someone who is an emissary of Yeshua. Doesn't mean that they do anything other than that particular, it's just letting you know the hat they're wearing at the time. Okay? When I do a class and I'm teaching you something, like when I did the teachings about Shabbat, when I did the teachings about the feast, basic, this is what, when, where, how, what to do, what not to do, etc., then I'm wearing the teacher hat. When I'm kind of cracking the whip and saying, come on, let's do it, you know what to do, but you're not doing it, that's the prophet hat. If I'm visiting a town, trying to help establish a group of people into a group of, who have come together and they can actually form a congregation, that's the apostle hat. So yeah, these roles are for today, and this person obviously, is new to some of the teachings here. So last week I covered that quite a little bit. Some of the other teachings I've done, I covered it, understanding the roles of the fivefold ministry. So yes, they are absolutely, because in Ephesians, to whoever asked that question, I think it was Jesus, look, the thing is, those roles, it says until. Those roles need to be in place until, and the until has not happened yet. Until we all come into the unity of the completeness of the fullness of Messiah, which has not happened yet, okay? Next question. And when I say next question, I can't help myself. Manny put together a couple of really good videos now under the MTY Worldwide YouTube channel. And one of them I watched the other day for the first time. Because I trust him with his stuff because he puts these things out there so good. And the video ends with the light going out and it says, next question. Have you seen that video? No, you got to watch that one. That's a good one. And it's just, after I said whatever I said, at the end of it, I go, next question, and the light goes out. Anyway, next question.
All right, from Georgia, it says in Colossians 1:19, could completeness be replaced with creation or set apart ones? If not, could you explain the verse more clearly for me, please?
Say this, can completions be what, where?
1:19 says, could completeness be replaced with creation or set apart ones? If not, could you please explain the verse more clearly?
No, it's just saying that in describing Yeshua and saying that Yeshua is the one who did all these things, and it says that all these things, having him have the preeminence, having the authority over all these other things, rulerships, the principalities, everything in verse 16, that all of this, that made him before all and in him all came together, and all these other things that have to do with all that authority, head of the body, everything else, this is all because in him all the completeness of the Father was well pleased to dwell. So no, calling it set apart ones, calling it creation, it's missing the point. The completeness of the Father was well pleased to dwell in this one, and because of that, all these other things were done to serve him. Okay? And by the way, if we're going to be kings and priests, it's because at that point, the completeness of the Father will be well pleased to dwell in us. Think of it that way, okay? Good question.
All right. From Denise, it says, in Colossians 2:14, it states, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which is contrary to us, and nailed it to the cross. Please explain. What are the ordinances?
Okay, so when you're looking at verse 14, okay, he says, and you will go, let's go further back, okay? Verse 9, because in him dwells all the completeness of the mightiness bodily, and you have been made complete in him who is the head of all principalities and authorities. Now we're establishing that he has authority to do this next thing. Okay, we're making sure that context-wise, you know that he has the full authority to do what is about to come after that. that in him you were also circumcised with a circumcision not made with hands, in the putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Messiah. Okay, so now he's saying is, look, there's one thing to take away a piece of flesh, but you're actually having your heart circumcised, which always, by the way, both were required. And by the way, this verse is not telling you that the fleshly one is no longer required. That's not what's going on here either. What we're saying is that having done these things, having been buried with him in immersion, in which you were raised with him through the belief in the working of Elohim, who raised him from the dead. So now we're understanding that there was this resurrection and there was this change from death to life. He says, and you, being dead, because of in your trespasses, you did things that brought the death penalty. You being dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he has made alive together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses. So now let's keep understanding that that's what it's all about. Now what follows is he explains what that looks like because of the trespasses. He says, how did he do this? He blotted out the certificate of debt that you owed because of trespasses. Okay? The certificate of debt that was required by the law. Now, he didn't get rid of the law. He got rid of the certificate of debt that you required because you broke the law, which stood against us. The law didn't stand against you. The certificate of debt stood against you. And he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the stake. See, what you also don't know is that historically, in the day this is talking about, they would literally nail your offenses to the stake that you were crucified on. So if someone walked by, they know why you were there. Okay? Look it up. It's not it's historically accurate. So they understood what this meant. You don't, because you never picture that. You see the movies where they put Messiah up on a cross. They put maybe the thing that says, here's King of the Jews, whatever, above his head. But they never see this whole nailing of this is why he's here. Okay? But that's what they did. And so he's saying, look, Messiah took the guilty verdict that you had because you were guilty. You were trespassing. And he took that and said, I will take that and pay for it. Imagine we'll go back to the car analogy. Imagine you have a problem with speeding and you get a lot of speeding tickets. Okay? Those tickets are against you. They're held against your record. They're held against your license. And what if somebody came in and said, I will take those away. I'll wipe it off your license. I will pay your tickets for you. They will no longer be held against you. By the way, does that now mean you can never get another ticket? No. If you speed, you still get in trouble. The law is still there. You do this a little bit with that, how many of you, I don't have to raise your hand, but I know I've done this in the past because as a younger man with driving a fast car, got tickets, and there was a way to go take a class, and if I took the class, it would wipe points off my license. So it would take something that was against me and wipe it out. And I did something to accomplish that. And what this is saying is that you had something against you, not the law, the breaking of the law. The ticket, let's just make it simple. You broke a Torah command, it created a ticket, and those tickets are accumulating. And because they're against you, they need to be taken out of the way or you can't have a forever kingdom experience. Because those tickets would not allow for you to pass into that kingdom. And so he makes it possible through his death, burial, and resurrection to have that taken away. Now, it doesn't take away the possibility that you would continue to sin, which is why Paul tells you things like, if you indeed continue. This is why Yeshua tells us in John, all those branches that don't stay in me end up in the fire. And they burned up like the kindling, right? So you can choose not to stay in him. But what he's saying is if you choose to stay, I provided a way for those things that were against you, that you were guilty of, to no longer be held against you. So not only are they, wiped out, like as far as like, they could be taken off your record, but they're actually, expunged. If we think of it like today's legal thing, expunged, like there is no record of it anymore. They're expunged. Now, that doesn't expunge all future offenses. It means that everything that you did that involved that thing is expunged from your record. Okay? So now when we look at it, we say, look, and you who are dead in your trespasses, is about trespasses. The one who has authority, he's head over all the principality and authority, from verse 10, etc., who had all the mightiness of Elohim in bodily form in him, that one was able to blot out the rap sheet. Okay, the certificate of death, the tickets that were against us by the dogmas, by the law. And there's nothing wrong with the law, but the law did let you know that there was a problem, which stood against us. Now remember, it's not the law, but it's the certificates of debt that were against you. And he's taken them out of the way and nailed that to the stake. Does that make sense now? Okay? And by the way, then him stripping the principalities and authorities, saying, look, you were under the authorities of darkness. All of this strips away that darkness, puts you in light so that you don't have those penalties anymore because you're not going to walk in the light. Okay? If you walk in light, nothing can be against you. Now, of course, if you choose to walk back in the darkness, you can accumulate a bunch of new tickets. And that's where you then have to repent and make teshuvah and then ask Yeshua to have the blood then applied to those new tickets. Does that make sense now? Hopefully that answered the question. Okay, next question.
All right, comment on that from Pete Lamb. Says, excellent analogy coming from a prosecutor. Just believing that you're a law-abiding citizen isn't enough. You have to walk it out.
Amen.
From Georgia, in Colossians 2:17, could the shadow of things to come be the Sabbaths and the festivals, etc., of which we will be keeping in Olam Haba?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably exactly what it's talking about. The point is that the Christian teachers will try to diminish that, these things are not a big deal, they're not important because they're just shadows of something. And they'll also get it wrong from a point of view of, that it's talking about judging them and keeping the pagan stuff. And they get that backwards, okay? I mean, I think the most likely correct context of all this is like, hey, look, you let that stuff go, you're no longer doing it. And we all feel this time of year we just passed through. A lot of you that are no longer doing Christmas had a lot of family members judged you because you're no longer doing Christmas. Or they'll judge you because you're going to Sukkot when you go to Sukkot, or you're going to Passover, or you're keeping Shabbat on Saturday now. So he's saying, look, don't let anybody judge you in these things. All right, or that you're not eating pork anymore, whatever it is. Okay, that's only something that should be dealt with within the body of Messiah. All right. Anybody else?
Okay, back at Norma Silva. For about changing our minds, what about those that isolate themselves, claiming having a direct relation with the Father in a deeper spiritual level, but they do not interact with the body and are not in compliance with Torah? Are those considered to be in darkness?
Yes. Because he tells you that you're to understand him in the context of a personal relationship in a group context. And so that's A. And B is everything is done in a structure. The light structure is an authority structure. And that structure, it's not a structure of one. So there's a certain amount of darkness in a person that says, I get direct downloads, I don't need to be a part of any group, and I'm just in a deeper place than the rest of you. I'm going to go sit in a cave and hide. Elijah tried that, and Yahweh said, no. You're not by yourself. There's 10,000 that haven't bent the knee. Get back out there and get back to work. Okay? So no, that person is dealing with a certain... Now again, when you say darkness, we're not talking about complete darkness. In other words, even in Christianity, there's not complete darkness. There were some things that were, we need to go in the shelter. All right, we're going to need to end the broadcast there, and we need to get everybody into the back room.